This recording today is the 7th of October 2025. I just want to talk and make this video so I can then use the transcript for doing an AI research on this subject. So I read this book, a few others of Hannah Arendt. I can't remember the name of the book, but then it's somewhere here. Yeah. Lerman's Hannah Arendt and Participatory Democracy. Then we have that several people has studied already Hannah Arendt's political philosophy. She didn't like to be called such, but she solved a lot of problems in current democracy. A few of the problems that she solved cannot be solved with what would be, let's say, business as usual democracy, but it needs technology. Some of the problems of democracy were found by Hannah Arendt and were impossible to solve at the time of Hannah Arendt, but they are possible to solve right now with the technology that exists, given that one of the problems that Hannah Arendt explained was decentralization, that then becomes centralized, and there are technologies of decentralization today. And another problem was the recovery and collection of information, but nowadays there is technology to solve that. The education, etc. But we're gonna go through these concepts. Okay. So I make some order of these key concepts taken from the book, but I have to find these concepts in most of the books of Hannah Arendt. So now, to make them properly and to find what she wanted to solve or what she meant, etc. But okay, Hannah Arendt's critique of democracy is kind of average in the sense that there are many critics of democracy. Yeah. So let's go concept for concept. These are kind of phrases that I took from that book of Samuelson. Now, let's say it's, in fact, in Hannah Arendt terms, law in general and international law in particular are not commandments, as we have come to think of them as inheritors of biblical and natural law traditions. So then we are talking about enforcement and the problem of enforcement. Every single enforcement that is possible to do with blockchain has to be done with smart contracts. Then enforcement in the law, it can go online, defining online and offline, also two separate categories in the council system, is possible to solve partially the problem. Then we talk that the code becomes law. Yeah. So this is one of the situations that help us to solve a system of governance. Then is enforcement. In international law, this will solve a lot of situations, because if international law can have councils as pockets of jurisdictions, you could have transactions done by blockchains that can be activated by satellites or other kind of oracles. And then these kind of oracles, this can work with AG, or this can work with artificial general intelligence or super artificial general intelligence. And then you will have that countries will not worry too much about the thing, because they both agree in solving something, a transaction. They don't have to worry anymore about it. And this will be especially this will be especially helpful in the borders, yeah, in the borders, in places that are more informational friction, because it seems that most of the informational friction happen in the borders. It's not casualty that violence among countries happens to be in the borders, and it seems to be an informatical problem, yeah. Then there is another kind of violence that happened in wars, not at the border, but again, we're not gonna, that's not the situation now. We are talking about another subject. Now, it says the few and the many as a traditional separation and the relations that happen between them. What is the rift between philosophy and politics that can be traced back to Plato? So Plato and the Hannah Arendt's kind of archaeology that did on Greek philosophy lead us to see that philosophy has not been reconciled with politics precisely because philosophy will solve some things, but politics won't be able to apply them. Then we talk about, let's say, the emperor's philosophers that will apply philosophy whilst they reigned, or Plato's kind of philosopher kings. And we will talk about different situations in which it's assumed that educated people, group, a person, then will make better decision making. But how is it possible then to create better decision makers based on philosophy? She solved this. She talks about partially again. She solves partially this. She talks about that when we talk about deciding something for the group that is social, is unquestionable. Yeah, let's say what happened in the UN with the vote for the right of food, the right to have food, because it's a social matter, because we are talking about a resource that is necessarily for living, for the society to keep going. There is no question whatsoever politically. There is not political debate. It is a social matter that has to be addressed, and therefore it should not be questioned. Then the veto of perhaps just in the of United States and Israel should never have happened under the Hannah Arendt's philosophy of governance. Why? Because it is one of the resources that you will need for life. It is one of the paramount resources to exist as a human. And if we are talking about a human-centered system, then the social, which makes, keep people alive, should never be questioned. What is questioned politically is how to solve and provide to complete the social goal. So the social goal is to keep people alive, feed them, and that how it is that made is democratically and politically debate. Yeah, but no, it's not question if people needs to have food or not. That's not question whatsoever under the logic of Hannah Arendt. Then is only the how that is political. Yeah. Now, it means that the how is like, okay, we're gonna feed them with corn or we're gonna feed them with rice. We feed them with rice, then we're gonna get the exports from Asia. If we feed them with corn, we're gonna get the exports from United States and I don't know, other countries. If we're gonna feed the people with another kind of grain that the AI doesn't allow me to bring right now, then we then we bring it from Australia, because Australia produces a lot of cebada, it's called in Spanish. But okay, Australia produces a lot of corn, so that's political. Yeah, where the food gonna come from? Not if the food gonna be there or not on the table. Yeah. Now, let's go to the next thing. The new phenomenon of the masses and the transformation of the state into an instrument of the nation. The new phenomenon of the masses. So we are talking about the masses. She is still talking is not a new phenomenon. At the Second World War, it became the norm. Now, and the transformation of the state. The state is a technology. Yeah. The nation is an identity. Okay. The state is constituted by political, not political. The state is, both constitute political themes, but the state has a structural component that cannot be removed. The nation is conformed of symbols. In the future, those symbols will change. The nation might stop to exist, but the state will continue. Yeah. The nationalism is a technology. That's the phenomenon of the masses. The phenomenon of the masses appears before, after imperialism came nationalism. So in the old days, people used to fight for the empire, for honor, for the proudness, and they will know that an empire, will have certain dynamics, etc., in which you will fight for riches, honor, and come back being a man, it's bravery, etc., etc. Some values that will be considered the values of the warrior. After Second World War, because of nationalism, the phenomenon of the masses, the creation of the national state, because now they were nation states. Now a few empires remain during the Second World War. After the Second World War, then the kind of accommodation, let's say the fit of identity start to be more sharp and contrasted, and also it kind of start to become the AI doesn't allow me to bring the word specifically. The configuration. Okay. The configuration of every single nation is as a nation and identity start to become more clear. And then we have that the state will continue to exist structurally, as a set of, let's say, bureaucratic defined procedures and institutions, but the nation as a group of people with a certain identity was the new phenomenon. Then the state is first, the nation after. What she talks is that the nation, as a group of people with an identity based on symbols, has subordinated the state. Yeah, and that's a problem, because without the states there is no nation. Without nation, a state can continue existing. Anna Arendt talks about something very controversial, that is that it's impossible to have peace if we don't overcome the nationalism technology, because people will see not themselves as part of the other but different to the others, then they will continue fighting for an identity, a nation, and not the commonalities of being human. So then, instead to fight for honor, then people were gonna fight for a flag. Instead to fight for bravery, they gonna fight for a symbol. Yeah. Instead to fight for an institution, they could be fighting for an idea. Yeah. The nation is connected to land. The state is connected to the management of that land. So, and okay, more or less that's also an inherent critic, but I did not deep in the point, but the point, at least of her philosophy, that is not necessarily for the kind of study that we are doing, is that she talks that peace cannot exist whilst nationalism exists. Yeah, but it is because there is not a better technology so far to unite people in one identity, because it seems that land is an easy kind of point of reference. When we talk about humanity being the main point of reference, it becomes more complicated to unite. But maybe in the future, if there is a kind of unfortunate situation in which we are fighting machines, then humanity might become the center, and the state nation will not exist anymore, because people will not be nationalist. They will not fighting for a flag, for a piece of land. They will be fighting for humanity to survive. And this is an example. Yeah. I hope it never happened, but that's an example just to see what's the point of reference of Hannah Arendt. Yeah, okay. It says, okay, by democracy, Renner means the bourgeois constitutional democracy and the contrast he draws in with the more radical economic democracy that the councils could promote. Radical economic democracy. Okay, this is quite important, and which was supposed to take over the purely political democracy. She's talking about political economics. She's talking about the councils also having jurisdiction in how to lead the economics, and this is one of the key points for the cryptocurrency, because you could have borders that are extremely complicated, like let's see the Google Maps. Okay, let's go to the stance countries. We are going to one of the more complicated countries. Sorry, I didn't say countries. That they are more complicated borders. Okay, which we are talking about these valleys in Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. If I'm not wrong, the border is somewhere here. I can't remember. I cannot see the lines properly. Let me see layers. Okay, you see, this is crazy. There is land inside the land. Look, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, yeah. And now Kyrgyzstan, okay, the stands, Kazakhstan. So check these borders. Okay, so I wanna see the terrain, which you see, the terrain which shows something interesting. There is a lake here. The economics of this lake, even if we are in Tajikistan, do not function equal that the economics in the mountains. Okay? So then we will have that the economics of this area that is shared geographically, which is more or less a valley, another lake here, another lake. This is, look, there is a little bit of water here, but this is a valley. Okay, we are talking about a considerable fluvial resource happening here. So then we can say that relatively all this area is homogeneous. That could be a concept. People will agree if these two countries can agree in one smart contract, is because they both agree. And therefore they start new relationships based on what is there. The key is to not make those contracts unequal, unfair, and with pressure. You can always refuse to do a contract, but you can always create another contract. So you can create another contract that will be available for the other person. And these smart contracts can work perfectly in the valley, because what's the problem? You will have a different economy here, a different economy in this mountain, a different economy in this mountain, a different economy in this mountain. Yeah, but the economy in the valley, in 3 different countries, it is technically the same. Yeah, but then you have 3 different currencies, 3 different languages, different jurisdictions. Then you could have different taxations happening there. But if you could create a council in which people can unite regardless of the language of the country, just to agree in certain things related with political economics, then this area will be more prosperous than the area that doesn't have that kind of technology. Then it will enrich every single of those countries without breaking the country or breaking the institutionality or not changing even the nationality. But then people will talk more, debate more, and this would lead also to the solution of asymmetrical information. Then you will have that asymmetrical information or no communication happens in time of peace, as is asymmetrical information is relative to the amount of violence. The more asymmetrical information there is, that's one of the formulas that can be for the theory, that one of the theories that I'm creating. So the formula is like the more asymmetrical information exists, the more violence does exist. The less informatical this asymmetry, or the more asymmetric information, the more information that they share, the more peaceful the area becomes. So asymmetrical information, as not sharing information or not having the information or having wrong information, no communication at all, but actually the rejection of communication, communication minus something, usually happens in the areas where there is war. So then, just as a thought experiment, if everyone in the world knew everything, every single person knew everything, they would not have anything for what they will fight, because they could comprehend each other's positions. They could comprehend the others, they can be in the other's shoes. Then this thought experiment leads to the conclusion that violence can be informatical problem, not political one, which means that if it is an informatical problem, it's a technical problem, yeah, not political. And sometimes the question becomes not as a technicality. Sometimes the problem is not technical but political. But when you think in these terms, the problem becomes technical, which is precisely how these concepts can be used. But it's not that necessarily related with a cybernetic society, because a cybernetic society will lead to kill what humans are made of, which is humanity as consciousness, freedom of thought, will of power, or the creation, transcendence, possibility of choice. Yeah, that's the problem with cybernetic societies. Okay, but let's go back. I'll try to finish in soon with the next one. The truth was that the national state, once the very symbol of the sovereignty of the people, no longer represented the people, becoming incapable of safeguarding either its external and internal security. So we talk about the state. Cannot remember. Okay, this comes from approaches to the German problem, essays on understanding. Then we talk about the states. Okay, she talked about the national state. And this is straightforward. Yeah, let's say what happened in the French Revolution, that the state will no longer represent the people, but the state is the symbol of the people. Then the symbol of the people cannot hold anymore, not the reality. Then you have the studies of Anna Arendt on the different revolutions. Yeah, but what we care about is why revolutions failed, because revolutions will have a kind of decentralized kind of initial governance, but then revolutions become hell. Yeah, most of the revolutions fail. Now, why in the reconstitution of the state, the new states reconstitute does not solve the origin and legality of its origin. The problem for Arendt is the decentralization of power, creating an extreme problematic situation. We are talking about violence as the origin of the state. Then the legality of its origin is not solved. And then we talk about the reconstitution and constitution of the new state. This is linked to the modern state was a strong state, which is growing tendencies towards centralization monopolize the whole political life. Then it means that, okay, let's connect it first, but it seems to be that when the state origin is not solved legally, it leads toward monopolies and centralization. Then, the new phenomena of the masses and the transformation of the state into an instrument of the nation, which again is related with nationalism and the problem of violence. This is coming from the same book, and yeah, it is all related. Then let's see if we can solve this last part. Okay, Hannah Arendt on violence. The first one, from the 1969 essay on violence, the main cause for wars in our times, Anna writes, is this essay is either a secret death wish of the human species, not an irrepressible instinct of aggression, not finally the serious economic and social danger inherent in disarmament, but the simple fact that no substitute for the final arbitrate in the international affairs has yet appeared on the political scene. So there is not a police that has appeared, okay, internationally and effectively working. Such substitute will not appear in Hannah Arendt's views as a long national independence, namely freedom for foreign rule, and the sovereignty of the state, namely the claim to unchecked and unlimited power in foreign affairs, are identified. We find here a remarkable consistency by Arendts from the early to her late reflections on the international order. The principle of sovereignty has to be renounced if the problem of war is to be eliminated or at least mitigated. This is precisely just what Donald Trump has done less than a week ago, that said, United States is sovereign, we cut links with whatever is the deep state, whatever. This creates more information asymmetry. Yeah. Then instead to be symmetrical informational, it creates a situation in which both parties will distrust more each other. Yeah. So we talk about the principle of sovereignty of the states without consciousness, saying I can invade another country because I'm sovereign, I'm free, so I can do so. That's the problem. Yeah, according with Arendt. It's because there is also not necessarily a higher power, but let's talk what she says. She talks about a substitute for keep those instincts of aggression in check. So we cannot even talk about an entity, but something that will be an arbitrary. Okay. In fact, in Arendt's term, law in general and international law in particular are not commandments, as we have come to think of them as inheritors of biblical and natural law tradition. This is also something in law that, yeah, the law has to be enforced, yet we are humans and we share a similar kind of human, what is called human condition. And then this human condition allows us to see how the other lives as well, and we live in a common kind of dimension that makes us humans, and it's a point of encounter, a commonality, for which law can depart to. Okay, this is the first section of the critiques of Hannah Arendt.